With more than 1,200 murdered and over 250 kidnapped, October 7th marked the worst day in Israel's history since the Holocaust. In the book, While Israel Slept, former Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yaakov Katz reconstructs the warning signs Israel missed prior to the attack and assumptions that would prove fatal. A military intelligence system that failed to read the enemy's intent while overestimating its own deterrence. Katz details the complacency, mistaken analysis, and containment policy that allowed Hamas to prepare an assault Israel assumed would never happen. He reveals the inside story of drama happening the night before in the front lines, as well as failure that paved the way to disaster. Katz also looks forward with recommendations on what must change, from southern border defense to civil readiness, so Israel is never surprised again. He adds accountability matters, but so does fixing the system now. Deterrence isn't a plan, preparedness is.
Yaakov Katz is with us now. Thanks so much for joining with us. Where were you on October 7th? You know, whenever I talk with Israelis, it's always a very personal story.
It's a personal story for a country that each and every person still has some trauma that they carry with them. My family and I, we were home on October 7th. It was Jerusalem. It was a holiday. It was a Saturday. It was a Shabbat. We were sleeping in a little late, 8:30 in the morning, sirens go off in Jerusalem. We go down to the bomb shelter, and obviously this was not something that was supposed to happen. Later that day, our oldest daughter, who's now 22, just finished her military service. She was training to become an IDF officer. And as her father, I drove her back to the bus that was taking her back to base, to war. And I remember my wife turns to me and says, Yaakov, does she have to go? And I, you know, like any mother, like any father, any parent. And the answer was yes. This is a war that our country is in, and she is a soldier, and this is what her job is to do right now.
Wow. That must have been just heart-rending, because you don't know if you're going to see her again.
Well, you don't know where she's going to go. And I mean, look, every Israeli in our country, I think, knew someone who was either abducted or killed on October 7th. We're a small country with 0 degrees of separation. My own family, we knew 2 hostages from day one. We knew people who were killed on October 7th. In the 2 years since, my kids have known teachers whose husbands have been killed, rabbis in their schools who have been killed, kids who were in their youth groups who have been killed, soldiers who have stood up to sacrifice themselves on behalf of the security and safety of the state of Israel. It's a remarkable nation. Literally, I think it was the current prime minister who said, a nation of lions who have really stood up in a way to stand and to defend and to fight for their country.
Yeah, lions that are rising up.
Yeah.
But your book details that there were some pretty serious mistakes in not just the day of or the week of, but going back for a couple of years. And one of them was the intelligence services actually had the plans.
This was the worst circumstances of every possible mistake, unfortunately, that could be made. Because you can't say, Gordon, that Israel did not know that there was Hamas. Right? We had been fighting a war with them on average every 2 years ever since we pulled out of Gaza back in the summer of 2005. So we knew there was Hamas. We knew they were an enemy. We knew they had bad intentions towards us. We knew that they were declaring genocidal intentions. So how is it that we didn't think that we needed to go and get the job done and take care of them while they were still weaker before they grew into this monster that exploded into our country back on October 7th? And I think that's the real question, because when we look to the future, we have to ask ourselves, can this happen again? So maybe it won't happen with Gaza in the near future, but it could happen again because Israelis want quiet. They want to live. They want to have a good life. And containment, if that's an option, might come back on the table. So when we looked at what happened, not only was there a flurry of activity in the 24 hours preceding, intelligence alarm bells going off in the offices of the intelligence agencies, indicating that something was happening. So there was information. They just didn't have the imagination to understand what it was and to put the pieces together. But even the plans of Hamas, 2 years earlier, intelligence analysts had drafted a plan that described almost one-to-one what was going to happen. The plan's name was Jericho Walls, named for the biblical city of Jericho, whose walls came tumbling down, similar to what eventually happened to the barrier that Israel had built along the border with Gaza. And you know what was crazy? was that Israel's defense minister on October 7th, Yoav Gallant, former IDF general, never saw the plan until 5 weeks into the war. How did it not make its way to his desk? And I think for all those reasons and much more, we have to study, we have to learn, we have to better prepare, because there will be more strategic surprises in the future.
Well, Hamas seemed to know exactly what the defenses were, exactly how to cut through, and within moments of the attack had literally blinded the IDF. And was there an over-reliance on the tech?
There was 100% coordinated over-reliance on technology. We're all familiar with Iron Dome, right? It can swat missiles out of the sky like a mosquito. In 2014, when Hamas started entering Israel with tunnels and killed Israeli soldiers during an operation back then, so what did Israel do? No problem, we'll build a wall. We built an underground wall. We created a system to detect when they were digging tunnels across the border. How many people crossed into Israel on October 7th in a tunnel? 0. They came across the barrier. They came across the ground. And the way they did this, it was a very low-tech operation, but highly sophisticated. They studied the IDF. They understood how the military deploys. They understood what happens when they fire barrages of hundreds and thousands of rockets, as they did in the morning at 6:29 a.m. when they started that barrage. The Israeli soldiers, even in the frontline positions, go into the safe areas. And then they made a mad dash for the border, blew holes. Drones dropped explosive devices on cameras. And the first place they went was to those frontline positions to blow up the communications. So what did you have? You had an IDF force along the border, not small, but they could not see, they could not hear, they couldn't talk to Tel Aviv to call up reinforcements, and they're now fighting for survival in their own bases because they're bogged down because Hamas is in there massacring, killing, and eventually taking hostage as well.
Let's talk about the female observer unit. Here they're watching highly unusual activity. They're trained to identify it. They're reporting it up their chain of command. Yeah, I think I had this illusion that somehow Israel was this egalitarian society, the nation that had produced Golda Meir, and women were part of the military and military structure and were honored and respected. But their commanders actually threatened them with court-martial if they continued to report.
Yeah. So these soldiers, these female soldiers, in Hebrew we call them tatzpitaniot, like you said. They're the observers.
I can't pronounce that.
They sit in front of these screens, and they literally watch. Everyone has an area of operations along the border. The joke was, and I've been to these bases a number of times, the joke was if a bee flies by, they'll pick up on it. And their job is to see if you have a brush here and the next day it's there, why'd it move? What happened? Maybe there's a tunnel now, a rocket launcher. And in the months preceding October 7th, they're noticing a lot of changes. They're noticing extra training on the border. They're noticing more senior Hamas commanders coming and looking into Israel. They're seeing things, and they're reporting this back to their commanders. And their commanders are saying to them, you don't understand. You're a low-level soldier. Keep doing your job. If we need something, we'll let you know. And the reason was, I think, people have claimed sexism, and that could be part of it. But I think it was much more than that. What was at play here was that what they were saying didn't fit the narrative. Because the narrative in Israel was that Hamas did not want war. Hamas was deterred. Hamas wanted to keep getting the Qatari cash. Remember, Qatar was sending $30 million every month to Hamas. Hamas was being allowed, Gaza was being allowed to bring 20,000 workers into Israel every day to work. So what do you mean? Yeah, we see what you're saying, but that's not what's happening. The policy of containment, what we call in Hebrew the conceptia, the concept or the paradigm through which we looked at everything, that lens, it just didn't fit. So it was dismissed and pushed aside.
You mentioned it earlier that Israelis want peace. They want to live. They want to have a hope. They want to have children, grandchildren. They want prosperity. They want a better life. Hamas is actually on record, Hezbollah is on record, that is an inherent weakness. That because they're willing to die and they want to die in jihad, that they have a strategic advantage.
100%. I mean, our strength is our weakness, and our weakness is our strength. Because we want a good life, we're willing to turn a blind eye, kick the can down the road, contain the threat, not to deal with it. I mean, Gordon, look at what's happened to the world. Imagine, this is after Israel went to war, after we faced the most brutal massacre Most Jews murdered on a single day since the Holocaust. There's no war more justified. Look how quickly the world turned on us. Now imagine, do we really think that had Israel... And they're still turning. Do we imagine that had Israel gone to war without being attacked, to preempt, to prevent an October 7th, because they had intelligence, the world would stand by and applaud? Of course not. We know that. So there's something broken here. But with that said, and you hit the nail on the head, we have to understand here in the West that the values of these groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, are completely different than our values. The people of Gaza, for Hamas, their job is to be killed. Because you got to ask yourself a very simple question. And all these fake genocide accusations that are being thrown around here in the United States and Europe. Hamas had built under Gaza 300, 400 miles of tunnels, bunkers. Those are bomb shelters. How come they don't let the people of Gaza into them? And you know, they let the cat out of the bag because a senior Hamas commander was asked this. And you know what he said? It's not for them. It's for us. So what does that mean? The people of Gaza are meant to stay on top. They, the Hamas terrorists and commanders, go underground from where they operate and plan and orchestrate their attacks and launch their rockets. But when a country like Israel wants to defend itself, to attack, as any country in the world would do, the Palestinians above ground, they're meant to be killed. That serves the Hamas ambition.